First of all, Rich Meeusen, who's seated immediately next to me, is president and CEO of Badger Meter and co-chair of the Milwaukee 7 Water Council. Badger Meter, as you know, is based in Brown Deer. It has about 1,200 employees and operations worldwide, and it is the largest producer of water meters in North America. Next to Rich is Anselmo Teixeira. He is Senior Vice President of Siemens Water Technologies and manages the Municipal Wastewater Division headquartered in Waukesha. Siemens has operations in 190 countries, including Singapore and Israel, where water hubs have been established. Kim Marotta is seated next to Anselmo. She is Vice President for Corporate Social Responsibility at MillerCoors. MillerCoors is a corporate member of the Milwaukee 7 Water Council. As part of its business philosophy, MillerCoors seeks to reduce the water that's used to make beer, to identify ways to reuse wastewater, and to help with water conservation causes. And on the end is Barry Grossman. Barry is an attorney with Foley Lardner in Milwaukee, a member of the M7 Water Council Board of Directors. He specializes in intellectual property issues, and he believes this region needs to improve its ability to obtain patents for new water technologies. Again, this will be a conversation today, and we will be taking your questions a little bit later in this discussion. But I think we should begin with the question at hand, and that is, if you believe that Milwaukee indeed can be a global water technology hub, what should we be doing and where do we need to be by the year 2015? And I thought because he is so shy and so bashful, we begin with Rich Meeusen on this. Rich?
Thanks, Mike. You know, to figure out where we have to be in 2015, you have to separate short-term issues from long-term opportunities. Right now, it's very hard to sit around and talk about a talent shortage in this region because the economy's down, there are a lot of people looking for jobs. But remember, 2 years ago, we had a serious talent shortage, and 2 years from now, we're going to have a serious talent shortage. So talent is a huge part of that equation that we have to make sure we're in position to deal with by 2015. And the things we're doing in having the industry work with the universities, the School of Freshwater Science, the water law program here, the lab certifications that are being done at MATC, the business water programs at UW-Whitewater, all of those are part of the equation to get the talent in place that we need for 2015. The other side of the equation is the fact that that water is a growing industry, regardless of what, unlike oil, where oil will spike to $150 one day and drop to $80 the next day, water doesn't do that. What water does is it grows pretty steadily, and water rates over the last couple of decades have been going up both in the U.S. and internationally at least twice as fast as inflation, sometimes 3 or 4 times as fast as inflation. So the value of water is going up. People are recognizing that there's a value there. That represents an opportunity for the water technology companies that we have in this region to focus on water, to focus on technological development, and address some of the world's water issues with the talent that we have here.
All right, I'm going to have everybody weigh in on this, opening question, and I'll move it on down to Anselmo Teixeira.
Well, I think it's a question of focus and opportunities. We truly have a great opportunity in our hands to get this fast and running and analyzing from a market perspective and economic value perspective of these opportunities. If we compare the water markets, which is valued from $400 to $500 billion per year on a global basis, IT is valued at $600 billion, the cell phone, $500, telecom equipment, $300, semiconductor, $250 billion, and biotech, $40 billion. And as Rick said, this is a steady growth global market. As population grows, as water becomes more scarce, this market will continue to grow. Now, the other question is why Milwaukee and where we want to see in 2015. As I said, we have an opportunity in our hands. Why? U.S. is the largest global market, water market. We account for 30% of the global figures of these $400 to $500 billion. We have over 50,000 water treatment plants in this country. And we have 16,000 to 17,000 wastewater treatment plants in this country. So when we compare with the two countries that we discussed, Singapore and Israel, they have a handful in each of these two countries, and they have to cater to the market to export. There is no established water technology hub in the U.S. In the single largest market, we don't have it. And our country, we have the technology leadership in most of the water and wastewater treatment technologies. Compared to Singapore and Israel, I have to say, and being in those countries, being part of these initiatives, that we have a more developed and larger infrastructure to take on this one. Number of water-related companies in this region, a large industrial and engineering basis. And if we include Madison into the equation, Marquette and UWM, we have a much larger academia basis than those two countries had when they started.
Jim Marotta, we'll ask you, where do we need to be by 2015?
Well, I think you first need to take a look at perhaps the clusters that are working really well in the state of Wisconsin. So you look at the printing industry, you look at the insurance industry, you look at the biotech industry, and you take some of the best practices from those clusters and bring them to the water and how we're going to form the freshwater hub. So you start first, I think there's 6 things that you really need to focus on. The first would be research. You need to, and obviously we have a great format here and a foundation between all of our wonderful institutions and technical tech schools that we have in this community. But you need to have the strong connection between the research and the business community in order for the ideas to foster and become commercial opportunities. The second would be having adequate capital. Having the research available is one thing, but having the capital to be able to invest in these ideas and again bring the ideas so that they can become commercial opportunities is key, which goes hand in hand with the third, having an incubator program. When you look at an incubator, it's more than just providing great space that you might see, and you look at what happened with the biotech industry in Madison. So you provide the great space, but then you need to be able to provide the expertise, the intelligence, whether it be retired executives that can come in and take these young developing companies and help them understand how to develop business plans, how to put together boards, how to search out capital, how to really create and start a business is really key to an incubator program. Then if you look at, just an example, you need to have favorable legislation for this type of industry. As an example, and just a small example, when you look at printing, one of the reasons, or possibly one of the reasons that we've been successful, and when you look at the favorable legislation, printing companies are exempt from sales tax when they print catalogs. So our Quad Graphics here is able to compete and generate LL Bean business when there are certain incentives that make it better for them to come into this community and do business. And then the fifth is what Rich talked about, is having an adequate workforce. So making sure you're investing in your tech programs, in the students that are at those programs, and continuing to develop the workforce and opportunities. And then lastly, I think it's really key to have a very strong national public relations and branding campaign. We're a company or a community that tends to be a little bit shy about beating our own chest and talking about the great things that we're doing. But I think we as Milwaukeeans, as the Milwaukee 7, as this region, need to really be strong and vocal and talk about the opportunity that we are the one freshwater hub, and we have all of those 6 components that can make us really successful in this area, and we can do it through a national campaign.
Thanks, Kim. Barry Grossman from Foley Lardner.
I think we need to do all the things that we've talked about. To sum it up, I've sort of grouped it into 3 areas where I talked about, I think by 2015 we need to improve our innovation, we need to improve our investment, and we need to improve our infrastructure in all 3 areas. In innovation, when I look at the metrics, the patent statistics, we are not a global leader, we're not a national leader in water technologies yet. When you look at where are Wisconsin companies at least investing their research dollars and getting patents, and where's the innovation coming from, it's medical devices, biotechnology, and paper making are probably the 3 leading areas. Water technologies are far down the list. We need to do better, and I think we're putting in place the programs where we will do better. Technology has a long lead time, and that's why I think the program topic that you picked, 2015, is about the right time. By 2015, we should be doing much better. We should see more innovation in water technologies, more patents. We should become a leader. Anselmo's point is that there's a vacuum here that we can fill. There is no North American, or at least United States, hub for water technology, and it's an opportunity for us to fill it if we take that opportunity. We need investment, as Kim said. We need investment from the federal government. We need investment from the state and local governments. Investment of actual dollars, research dollars, and we need investments in terms of things like tax credits and support in areas, as Kim pointed out, that we'll do some things in the paper making. And I think we need to make sure that by 2015 our infrastructure is in place. We've had some commitments from the governor of $240 million for the School of Freshwater Science and other programs at UWM. We need to make sure that the new Niske, the research vessel, is in the water and doing research by 2015. It's on the drawing boards right now, but if it gets caught up in political processes where it never gets built or doesn't by 2015, that's a signal that we're in trouble. The School of Freshwater Science needs to be established, built by 2015. We need to see these cranes on the horizon pretty soon. We need to have a research park built by 2015. All of those things are things that we should have in place, that I think if we're there by 2015, we're well on our way to becoming what Anselmo said we have an opportunity to become, is a North American leader in water technologies.
You've all raised interesting points, and I'll try and get to a number of them here. Let me begin with this notion of investment. All of you represent businesses. Help me understand what you would like to see the public sector doing right now, government doing. What can government do? You touched on this, Barry, but we'll get other panelists to weigh in here. What can the government do, or should it do, to advance this initiative?
Well, Kim brought up a good point about tax incentives like the sales tax exemption for printing. And another classic example is in the last budget, the state included a property tax exemption for all R&D equipment used in biotech, a gift to the city of Madison, basically, but nothing for Milwaukee. Again and again, we've seen targeted tax incentives in the state go towards clusters that are not located in Milwaukee. I think there should have been a property tax exemption for R&D equipment used in water technology. I think we need some incentives that we can say to the businesses outside of Milwaukee, here's a very good reason why you should come here. The fact of the matter is, this is a difficult state to do business in. We are a relatively high-tax state. We do not have tort reform, so we're the Alabama of the North when it comes to lawsuits. We have very aggressive unions. It's a tough state to do business in. We need some real strong positives on the other side of the balance sheet if we're ever going to attract some of these businesses to come here. And I think we've got to start looking at this. When we talk to the state legislators, when we talk to the governor about this, the attitude very often is, well, we don't want to do anything for one industry group. We want to do it for everybody, or else the other industry groups will get upset. But that didn't stop them from doing something for biotech. That didn't stop them from doing something for printing. Why don't we have some targeted incentives for water? I think that's a very positive thing we could do.
Anybody else want to offer a thought on that? Anselmo?
Well, I can talk about what the Israelis did back in 2005 and 6 and what Singapore did. Basically, they had a vision. And the goal from Israel was to double the exports in 3 years while promoting R&D and attracting foreign investment. The country back then was exporting $900 million, and they had a reasonably good technology basis in the irrigation, conservation, reuse, and desal. And they said, well, first of all, they formed what they call Israel New Tech. It's an organization formed by the end of 2006, led by the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Labor. And the members were the Israel Export and International Corporation, Ministries of Environment and Science, the Water Authority, the National Water Company MillerCoors, the Council of Higher Education, and the industry leaders. And they set aside a $30 million budgets for a 5-year period to support the industry, academia, entrepreneurs, investors, and cooperation agreements with utilities and international organizations. And how the funds were disbursed, mostly for R&D and demo plants. They created what they call the Chief Scientist Program, funding for incubators, like Kim said. It's very vibrant. There are dozens of companies, and the venture capitalist is quite active in Israel. And the grants are in the range of 50% of own investment for what the match in the government would provide for material and labors. And this is not only for local companies, but also for foreign companies going to Israel. Another support mechanism was through MillerCoors, the national water utility, for supporting startups by providing beta sites. Recently, I was talking with MMST, Kevin, I don't know if Kevin is here, he said I would more than welcome to have MMST as a beta site attraction for you guys to come in here. And so this is basically the results so far in Israel. 168 projects presented, 76 are still alive. 108 new companies and projects established, and 1/3 of them were incubators. And I can go into Singapore if time permits, or
Let's hold on that,
okay,
and we'll get back to that later. But you're saying there is in your view, and in the view of at least a couple of you, there is an appropriate role for government in terms of investment tax credits, doing things, helping with incubator projects, things like that. You'd like to see more of that, Barry?
I'd say it's more than an appropriate role. It's an essential role.
Yes.
If we're going to become successful, the government has to play a key role in this, and it has to do the kinds of things that Anselmo has talked about. When you get into Siemens and GE have both built large R&D facilities in Singapore within the last three years. I think GE has made a $100 million investment in their R&D facility there. And the reason it's there is not because Singapore in years had a leading group of researchers, did not have the best water researchers or water scientists or water technology people. The reason they're there pretty clearly is the fact that Singapore was giving significant tax investment credits to making the investment there. Those are the areas with which we're competing. And if we're going to be successful in that competition, we've got to be able to match them in some way. Maybe we have capabilities that they don't have. We have a unique confluence of factors that bring together significant academic resources, significant business clusters. We've talked about in the press, people have heard about the 120 water companies. I think it's actually more than 120 in our region. But we've got the manufacturing capabilities, the business capabilities, the research capabilities. The Great Lakes Water Institute is the largest academic R&D facility on the Great Lakes. It needs to be enhanced. It will be. The funding is there for it. That's one of the metrics that I look for by 2015. If that facility is not enlarged, modernized, and enhanced, then we're not on our way to where we need to be. But with all of those factors, if we get the essential help that we need from the state government with incentives, then I think we can get to where we need to be to become the North American global hub of water technology.
And just to add on the Singapore thing, it's not out of reach. Singapore is an island nation with 5 million people. Wisconsin has 5 million people. And Singapore simply took $250 million, put it in a fund, and said, we will match dollar for dollar any water technology investment made in Singapore. And Siemens and a lot of other companies said, we'll take you up on that. They went right there. Well, Wisconsin could do a very similar thing. We've got the same amount of population, a lot more space, same amount of population. And where we have an advantage over Singapore and Israel is, yes, they're doing a lot in R&D, but they don't have the manufacturing base that we have in water technology. They don't have the water that we have in water technology. And they don't have, I don't think they have as much talent as we have with all of the universities and technical schools we have here.
It's interesting, even from economic power, the two countries and Wisconsin, we have the same GDP, around $200 billion per year.
So we should be able to compete very effectively. The difference is Singapore is a kingdom. And the king says, do it, they do it. I'm not necessarily advocating for the end of democracy in Wisconsin, okay?
Who would be the king, Rich?
No. I have a day job. I'm just pointing out that it was a lot more easily done.
Let me pursue this point. Who are we competing against in this country? Because all of you are familiar with the study that was done by Mark Levine over at UWM. And I read the entire study, and it suggests that we're overstating what we have here, that there are other cities and places in this country who are every bit as prepared to compete for that title of water technology hub. Let me have you each address that. What do you think about that report, and is there truth to it?
Well, I was quoted in the paper this morning, so let me start with this. Mark Levine wrote an article basically saying that Carlos Santiago is wrong, that university research and applied research into science and engineering cannot drive economic growth. I have two friends. One friend tells me that I drink too much, and another friend tells me I drink too little. Okay. Now, the friend who tells me I drink too much is my doctor, and the friend who tells me I drink too little is my bartender. All right. Now, we have Mark Levine on one side saying this is a doomed effort, and we have Carlos Santiago on the other side saying, no, this can work. Well, Carlos Santiago is an economist, and Mark Levine is a history teacher. All right. So when you're talking about economic development, whereas my bartender could be right, maybe I am drinking too little, I'm going to go with Dr. Santiago on this one, all right? I tend to think he's got the right view. And frankly, what Mark Levine cited in his report was Fresno, California as a greater hub of water technology companies. Fresno, California has several hundred irrigation companies that have formed a consortium. One small niche of the water market. That's all they've done. That is not a greater hub than what we have here. What we have here in Milwaukee is companies, over 120 companies that are involved in finding water, cleaning it, delivering it, using it wisely, cleaning it, and returning it to nature. We are on that entire cycle. And when you're talking about water meters, heaters, filters, fixtures, or pumps, they come out of this region. This is not just a one area region like irrigation. So I take a lot of exception with Dr. Levine's report. And you have to remember, a history teacher who doesn't want us spending money on science and engineering because he wants more money spent on history and philosophy maybe isn't quite as unbiased as you would think.
Who are we competing against, though? That was, I think, his point, is that there are others who are looking at this and saying there is opportunity here.
I don't think anybody is as far along as we are. In the United States, I don't think there's any region of this country that has the concentration that we have or the university work being done. I don't think anybody is as far along as we are.
Anybody else want to?
I think that there are other people who recognize this problem who'd like to be where we are. Michigan, Illinois, California, Pennsylvania is making some inroads into trying to say that they should be a water hub. I think it's because of their political connections to the Obama administration that they think they can get some stimulus money. So lots of people recognize the problem. This is not,
or the opportunity,
or the problem being a void in water leadership and the opportunity that presents. And I think, as we said at our water summit 2 years ago, we have the opportunity now, and we need to place a bet. We need to place a large bet, and we need to place it quickly if we're going to establish leadership. We can't continue to procrastinate and just study or think about it, because others will fill that void. One of the things when we talk about the Mark Levine study, and he looks at lots of metrics, and it's a well-done academic study. He's got all kinds of measurements, but it's sort of, he did what the great philosopher, sometimes hockey player Wayne Gretzky said about how he looked at a problem. He says, I don't skate to where the hockey puck is, I skate to where it's going to be. And that's, I think, what Mark Levine did. He looked at the metrics of where we are today. And when you look at the patent metrics, we're not where we need to be. We don't have the metrics to show that we are a global technology leader. But we are putting in place the things that Carlos Santiago is doing at UWM to establish UWM as a research university, the kinds of things that Marquette is doing in water and public policy, the kinds of things that UW-Whitewater is doing to establishing business courses related to water. We are putting in the infrastructure. We're getting the Great Lakes Water Institute modernized. We're going to have a state-of-the-art research vessel that will be the only research vessel that does research on the Great Lakes year-round. Nobody else has those capabilities. That's where the hockey puck is going to be. That's where we're looking, and those are the capabilities that we have to establish our credential as the North American global hub for water technology, and nobody else has that. They have little pieces of it. At the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, they do some very nice research in water technology, but it's one program. That's all that they have. They don't have the industry base that we have. They don't have the research vessel. They don't have the Great Lakes Water Institute. They don't have the School of Freshwater Science, which is going to be established. So I think the 2015 timeframe, Milwaukee could be and should be, and with the right leadership and government support, can be a global leader in water technology.
I think when you ask the question, who are we competing with, I think very often we're competing against ourselves. It's that mentality that we can't do it. And I think if you took a look 20 years ago, and if Madison would have said, you know what, we just can't do it. We can't become known for biotech. We can't become experts in this. We can't take our research and turn it into a research park. I don't see the economic opportunities. That just doesn't happen. You need to be forward thinking. You need to think of where you're going to go. When I go back to work this morning, I guarantee you nobody at MillerCoors is saying we're just never going to be able to beat ABI, so let's just stop trying. You know, they've got it all figured out. They've got all the resources. That's just not how you move ahead. So his research, certainly Dr. Levine is much smarter than I'll ever be, but it's discouraging. Yeah. And, you know, and I'm glad that there wasn't a Dr. Levine in Madison 20 years ago when they were looking at where they were going with biotech.
Well, let me, Anselmo, you want to add?
I think that I agree with Kim that, you know, we are competing against ourselves. And I think a question itself, which we can go back to the end, would be how do we effectively implement this? Because that's, you know, and I applaud Richard and Paul Jones and all the members of the MSEV for the past 2 years for what they have done in creating this enthusiasm, this vision, and I'm bringing all of us in here. But, you know, it's important also to see what the 2 other hubs did, and that turned them successful in implementing. And you know, talking about Singapore, again, they formed a steering committee led by the Singapore Economic Development Board, which is a government-based organization. And plus the PUB, which is our MMSD, and the Milwaukee Water, the 2 local universities, the Department of Tourism and Industry, similar to what we have. We have a missing catalyst into this, which is the government gluing all of this into this. The other things that they define, it's 5 strategies. One was the industry development, attract foreign companies and grow locally based companies and startup. Technology development was a key factor, establish beta sites. They even came up with a tax break for early adoption of technology in Singapore, which is very important. We deal with a very conservative water industry, adopting early technologies from the incubators. And they have effectively linked themselves with Berkeley and University of in Denmark. So they reach out for international cooperation. Human resources were the 3rd strategy, internationalization and marketing. They effectively branded Singapore as a major water hub through conferences. How they implemented? Government allocated $250 million on a 5 years program. Again, 50% break on the labor and materials, and covering local wages, local materials, professional services, and IP. Incentives can be applied to basic and applied research, pilot tests, IP research and costs, product standardization, market analysis, and product rollouts. Very effective. This is what really attracted Siemens, our company, when we look into this, not only basic research, but taking what we have here, what we come up in Waukesha, and having someone there spending with a 50% break, analyzing market, analyzing who do I compete to in terms of IP. And the results are, they already have 50 companies established in the water. Our company has invested $33 million in the Global Water Center there back in 2007. We have over 40 people already in the grounds. GE just announced a $100 million investment on a similar global water hub. Marmon Water, US-based company, is investing $15 million. Black & Veatch, a US-based engineering firm, announced the investments. And Nitto Denko from Japan, $5 million over 5 years, specific research on membrane, and several local companies that took advantage of this program.
Well, can I just jump in here? Because I want to steer the conversation in a slightly different direction, but it does play off what's been said here. I was struck yesterday, some of you probably saw in the paper, there was an interesting story about investment tax credits done by the state. And there were some people in Minnesota looking enviously at some of what Wisconsin has done. But I was struck by something that was said at the end of the story, and it was by Tom Hefty, who most people in this room know is a retired executive, ran Blue Cross Blue Shield. He's been outspoken about the state's business climate. And at the end of it, he said every program should be judged on the basis of jobs. It should be job creation, should be job 1, job 2, and job 3. And here's my question. Do you not run the risk of losing momentum for this kind of initiative if we don't have that big win, that we cannot point to and say, look at how many jobs were created, look at what's going on in our economy because of this initiative? Does scoring jobs in the next 5 years determine sort of the future of the momentum of this initiative?
I think that's the, obviously jobs are very important, but that is the short-term view. Right now, Milwaukee says, well, we have a down economy, we have high unemployment, we need jobs, 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 and it's all about jobs. 2 years ago, nobody was talking about jobs. That wasn't the issue. We had low unemployment and people weren't as concerned. We were talking more about positioning ourselves for the future. Whereas jobs are important in the short term, if we focus entirely on job creation, we don't focus on R&D efforts and attracting corporate headquarters or retaining our corporate headquarters, if we don't focus on that, when the economy turns around, we're not going to be in the position in 2015 to capitalize on the opportunities that are out there. So I don't think, whereas I think jobs are important, I really think we have to focus on where we're going with this whole effort. The Water Council is more of a marketing effort than a sales effort. The M7 is a sales effort. The M7 is saying, here's a targeted account, we're going to go out there and try to get these guys to move to Milwaukee. The Water Council says, no, what we're doing is we're trying to make the Southeast Wisconsin region very attractive to water technology companies and make it a hub of water technology so that in the future, in the long term, we will grow the companies we have here and attract other companies. It's the difference between marketing and sales, in my opinion.
I think that job creation will be a natural consequence. As Rich said, we really need to get this going and implement and attract firms and have our designers creating new equipment, marketing, and this is going to be a natural and multiplying consequence, not only for each specific industry, but the multiplying effect of this into the water market, into our region.
But and can I just ask Anselmo, the Singapore effort, they didn't say, Siemens, you can only get these credits in Singapore for each job you create. That wasn't the focus. It was get Siemens to do R&D in Singapore and the jobs will follow. That's the difference. It was not a jobs credit. We tend in Wisconsin to say it's all about jobs. We're only going to give jobs credits. You have to look at the bigger picture.
Right. It's a consequence. Will be a natural consequence.
I think we're going to grow we're looking at economic development, and economic development is going to pull with it all the jobs. There's one aspect, we've been focusing a lot on water technology. One aspect of jobs, and if you're looking at job creation, that we can take advantage of, maybe even in the short term, is attracting wet industries. We have a lot of water. We have 20% of the world's water right outside our doors. And we also have some of the lowest water rates in the country. And when you look at, for example, comparing Milwaukee to Atlanta, Georgia, a large industrial user of water in Milwaukee is going to pay annually about $160,000 for water. A large industrial user of water in Atlanta, Georgia is going to pay over $1 million a year for water. Just the cost alone is significant, but the real benefit we have is that large industrial user in Milwaukee is going to have a reliable supply of water. They pull the water out of the lake and they're going to put the water back into the lake. The large industrial user in Atlanta has a supply which is unreliable because Georgia just lost a major lawsuit that's going to limit their ability to supply water to the region. And if I'm an employer in Atlanta, let's say in the food industries that uses lots of water, I ought to be looking at Milwaukee to relocate my business.
How helpful would it be to all of these efforts if you had one of those companies in Atlanta say, all of a sudden, you know what, we have water concerns, and we're so concerned, in fact, we are going to pull up roots and we're moving to Milwaukee. How helpful would that be to this overall effort?
If I can give just a small example, and we're not the company that's pulling up roots, but we have 8 breweries, and we have 8 breweries all across the United States. We have increased employment in our Milwaukee brewery, one of our oldest breweries, because of the water availability, because of this region and our ability. We are now producing Coors Light in our Milwaukee brewery, and we continue to add jobs to that brewery. So it's a small example. We have breweries in Fort Worth, Texas, where certainly there's water, conditions and issues there, in Irwindale, California, which is in Orange County, and in Albany, Georgia, not far outside of Atlanta. So as we continue to shift beer, shift volume, shift production, our Milwaukee brewery and our location here is very key to our business.
Mm-hmm. I called this weekend a couple of friends in the industry and other states in the nation, and I briefly described the Water Hub initiative, and I placed a question: what would it take you to move in here and invest in here? Well, first of all, it's very rewarding to know that there is a emerging American basic water technology initiative. So they welcome these opportunities because they tend to go to universities a little bit disjointed. And the basic was, well, are you advanced enough for me to consider, and what kind of incentives? What would move me would be, you are competing with the research I'm doing in my own state, or I'm doing in California or somewhere else, or even considering Singapore, but it goes back to the basic, what kind of incentive would I have to shift from California or Alabama to go to Wisconsin?
And Mike, there's a difference between water technology companies and wet industries. Water technology companies are looking for R&D incentives, or an example is the property tax exclusion for biotech R&D. We should have that on water. That's what they're looking for. The wet industries want exactly what Barry and Kim said. They want a reliable supply of good, clean water. And wet industries, as compared to the R&D companies, the wet industries tend to generate more employment, especially if you're talking about food processing and industries like that. Barry's right. Not only do we have 20% of the world's fresh water, not only do we have a good, reliable supply, not only are our water rates lower than almost anywhere in the United States, but our water plants in Milwaukee are running at 30% capacity. So what's our cost to add one more wet industry in Milwaukee? It's pretty close to zero. The incremental cost is pretty close to zero. We should be in this city trading water for jobs. We should be saying to these companies, if you're going to come here, yes, other people are offering TIF districts and tax credits and everything else, but if you come to Milwaukee, we'll offer you water. We'll offer you cheap or even free water if you create jobs in certain areas of the city. Something that we had proposed, in fact, the mayor and I co-wrote an editorial a few months ago recommending WAVE districts, water attracting valued employers. And we think that's a huge opportunity for companies like that.
What was the reaction to that proposal that you and the mayor made?
We met with the governor on it. We met with Dick Leinenkugel, Secretary of Commerce. They all think it makes a lot of sense. They're all very positive about it. The question was, can the Public Service Commission, which controls rates in Wisconsin, authorize those types of rates, or does it have to go to legislation? 2 weeks ago, we met with Eric Callisto, the head of the PSC, and he said, no, they can authorize it. And if Milwaukee comes in with a rate case asking for authority to offer water for jobs, they have the authority to approve that. So our next step is to work with Milwaukee on a rate case. And we would be the first city, I think, in the United States to ever offer water for jobs.
And what kind of reaction do you think you would get if that became a realistic possibility?
I think and for those of you who don't know, a few months ago, a federal judge ordered that Atlanta has 3 years to stop taking water out of Lake Lanier. That means in 3 years, the taps in Atlanta are going to run very, very dry, or the cost of water is going to skyrocket. If I'm a wet industry operating in Atlanta, that board of directors is sitting around a table today, because 3 years is a very short period of time when you're relocating plants. That board of directors is meeting today saying, what are we going to do in 3 years? And Milwaukee, Wisconsin ought to be down there. The Department of Commerce ought to be down there running full-page ads in the Atlanta newspapers saying, worried about water? Come to Milwaukee. Now, the sad part is we have a Department of Commerce here with, I don't know how many employees it has. I read something that said 80, but maybe it's even more. It's a large number of employees, and we have specialists in biotech. We have specialists in tourism. We have specialists in paper making, and we have nobody in water. That's a crime. No, there is nobody to go to Atlanta and say to the businesses, come to Milwaukee. We need to fix that, and we need to fix it quickly.
Mike, one of the things, and when you talk about, Rich points out the void at the state level for encouraging industries to locate here, and Anselmo talked about what Singapore did. It had people going all over the world to sell their capabilities. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of, being associated with the Water Council that Rich and Paul Jones put together, is that this is an organization that has no money, no employees, and no authority. And yet, with those three handicaps, I think we have been pretty successful in raising the visibility of Milwaukee, not just regionally or nationally, but really internationally. We've had presence. We've been to conferences in Singapore. We've been to conferences in Stockholm, all done by volunteers, pretty much spending their own time and their own money to do all of this. We've placed articles in major magazines.
The United Nations. We are the 14th city on earth to be named a United Nations Global Compact city, and the only one focused on water.
That initiative was undertaken by the Water Council, again, with no budget, no employees, and no authority to do it. But we did it. We talked to the mayor. He signed on to it and supported it. But all the work that went into it, which was significant, the bureaucratic paperwork of just becoming a global compact city was pretty significant, all done by volunteers. We need to institutionalize some organization at the state, whether it's the Water Council, which I think we've got a plan for doing that, or whether it's the state, but we need some organization to take that banner and start declaring that Milwaukee has something to offer, whether it's to wet industries, whether it's to R&D capabilities, so that when at 2015, one of the measures of our success is going to be that when Siemens or GE or some other company wants to build a large R&D facility, they're going to come to Milwaukee, partly maybe because of tax credits, but they're going to come here because we have the best scientists, we have research capabilities, we have talent development, we have places like Marquette that are turning out lawyers who are trained in water law and water policy. We have UW-Whitewater training business people who are trained in the business of water, and we have a natural talent development pool. So I think that what we need is somebody to take up this banner and go out and be a little bit of a cheerleader, just like the Water Council has been.
And Mike, the question you want to ask, and we can change seats at any time. The question you want to ask, is why is government so late in signing on to the Water Council activities? Why in Singapore is government leading it? Why in Israel is government leading? And the answer is the Water Council in Milwaukee, the Water Initiative in Milwaukee, was not started by government. It was started by private industry. It was started by the universities. It was started by the volunteer groups. This was not a government-started initiative. In Israel and Singapore, it was the government that said, let's grow this into a water hub. So of course, they're right in there. They've got the credits. They're doing all the things right. In Wisconsin, we started this, and government tends to say, well, we didn't invent that, so I can't stand up and take credit for it when I'm running for office, so why would I help it? I really think it's time for government to step up and take its position.
You don't think that's happening now? For example, the mayor is trying to move forward with this Reed Street Yards notion to create a business technology incubator area just south of downtown. The governor, I think, will be here, and we'll talk about some of the efforts that they believe they're going to put forward. You don't think any of that is happening now?
Well, the governor raised my taxes $100,000 and gave it to the biotech industries as an exemption on R&D. So, no, I don't think the state government is stepping up. I don't think they're doing what they could be doing. The governor is now leading a trade mission to Israel, which is great. That's going to focus a lot on Israel's efforts. I'm not sure what that does for us. I hope it helps us. I do agree that the mayor is doing a good job. I think the offer of the Reed Street properties and some tax incentives that they put in place down there could be very attractive in helping us get that started. I think they're starting to step up, but I still think they're woefully behind.
So, as I said before, it is a question of opportunities and size of these opportunities. When we compare again water market, $400 billion global market, we live in the world's largest market right here in the U.S., compared with $40 billion in the biotech. The other point is we're running, and I applaud again, the M7 initiative so far, but we're running a little bit disjointed. I think that we reached what we can reach, or we can go a little bit higher into this, but we need to implement in a more effective way. And got me think over the weekend, what's going to take for us to get there, looking at what Singapore and Israel. We need to see this as a business opportunity, it's a multiplying, with a multiplying effect, not only for us in the industry, but obviously for the university, who will grow, for the job market, for the government, who will multiply and increase the economy with more taxes, with more revenue. And saying this, I think that we need a more refined business plan. We need a leadership from someone in the governments, like the two other countries had it, so they embrace, and they are the gel. And in this business plan, obviously, we need to show the constituents what are the necessary investment and resources from government, from the industry, from the university. What are the returns in terms of jobs, industry growth, and the university and tax generated. And we need to better define the roles of this government body, the industry, the university, the MMSD, and the Milwaukee Water. We need to define each one's role into this like the two other initiatives did. What kind of programs are they going to participate into this plan? We need to have a program, an effective program for startup companies, beta sites, and early adoption of technology in our own water and wastewater plants. And we need a promotional plan taking this initiative to AWWA, to WEFTEC, which are nationally and internationally recognized water shows we have in this country. So that's what I think it's going to take for us to be effective.
Let me touch a couple of different areas before we open up to questions from the audience. Rich, you mentioned this. Barry talked about it, and I'll have Kim address this. This is the whole issue of being a global compact city, one of only 13 in the world, 14 now. The question I have is how important is it for us to demonstrate that we take that designation seriously? It's great for marketing, but what has to be done in the next 5 years, realistically, to demonstrate that we are more than just a city with a special designation?
Sure. I can talk about it from a business perspective as well, because MillerCoors, which has two parent companies, one being SAB Miller and one being MillerCoors, are also signatories to the CEO Water Mandate, which is part of the UN Global Compact. And in fact, SAB Miller was one of the first signatories, along with Coca-Cola, Unilever, Levi's, and Pepsi. But so I think we've got great opportunities, but we have to bring it into our strategy, into the way that we operate as a city, or in the instance of MillerCoors, as we operate as a company. And kind of touching on where you're going with, public versus private, I wholly believe that all of the members of this community, well, public certainly has a role to play. The private industry has a significant role. In fact, the UN Global Compact says if we're going to attack this water crisis, the private sector has a significant role to play in this. So as an example, some of the things that through the CEO Water Mandate and the UN Global Compact that MillerCoors and other businesses in this community should look at and be taking advantage of is making sure we're reducing the amount of water that we're used in our operations, that we're engaged and working in public-private partnerships on watershed mapping, not only understanding what our watersheds are right now in 2009, but how they're going to be impacted by 2015, 2030, 2040 for our businesses that are currently here, for our community and how they're going to develop, and for increasing the growth in the population. We should also be really seriously looking at our water footprinting. If we're going to understand where our needs are and our Achilles heel are within our businesses, we need to understand the entire value chain. So while we're sitting here talking about industries and public and private government, we need to be working with our farmers. We need to be working with agriculture, where the majority of water is used in the process. We need to be working with the runoff from the irrigation. We need to be working and making sure that we're improving our water quality in this area. And then we also need to be looking at investments. A great example is a public-private partnership with the Lake Michigan Revitalization Program, achieving the Blue Wave certification from the EPA and bringing back that beach. That's a great example of economic opportunity, public-private partnerships, groups like MillerCoors and many other companies stepping forward and making a difference in our communities. So those things need to continue. That might not make us a freshwater hub, but we need to have that commitment from all of our businesses and all of our corporations that reside within the Milwaukee 7.
It's important to be able to point to that, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, and Kim, and it's not just doing all of that, but then it's exporting that knowledge.
Exactly.
It's doing all those things in our community, learning best water management practices, and what the UN mandated is all about is not a plaque we hang on our wall or something we do in Milwaukee and pat ourselves on the back. It's once we do that, teaching other cities, teaching other communities how we did it and what they need to do to improve their what's called the blue footprint, which when I was a kid, that always meant you got the right baby at the hospital. But today, blue footprint means, that was a joke, okay. Geez, tough audience. Today, the blue footprint is the other side of your carbon footprint. How are you using water? Are you using it properly?
Just one other example on the water carbon footprint. Well, first of all, I think we need to be involved heavily, leaders in the public policy dialogue, and be a leader out there as the Milwaukee 7 region. But another opportunity that I think may have just kind of gone or skated under the radar screen, as a consumer product good company, we're going to see market changes in how consumers engage with products within the next year. What Walmart's doing with the sustainability and creating a global retail sustainability index, they are working on developing a life cycle analysis for their 100,000 products that go on their shelves. And they're doing this on a global spectrum. So Marks and Spencer and Tesco and other retailers across the globe are invited, Cambridge, Duke, other leading universities and researchers and scientists. So UWM and Marquette and MSOE should be joining this group and talking about how we develop this life cycle analysis. They intend on having it completed by December of 2010. So when you go into a Walmart, their end goal, or a Target, or a Food Lion, or a Kroger, and you pull off a loaf of bread or 6 packs of beer, you'll be able to see the life cycle analysis of that product in some sort of form of an index, which will include its water footprint, its carbon footprint, its materials and efficiency. So the more our researchers and scientists are involved, the more that our companies here are part of this consortium and really leading the way and being a part of it will also change what that means from a consumer perspective, which I don't think we've always talked about.
Let's spend just a couple of minutes on this issue of the workforce. You brought this up at the start of this conference, Rich Meeusen. How big an issue is this for us as a region to do whatever it is we hope to do? Education is a huge factor, and having a qualified, trained workforce is a huge factor. What has to happen in the next 5 years to address some of your workforce concerns?
I think if we don't have the UWM School of Freshwater Sciences under construction within the next 1 to 2 years, we've got a problem. If we want to get where we're going in 6 years, which is a relatively short period of time, 2015, we need that school built, and we need to start attracting world-class researchers to this region to teach freshwater sciences. I think that's huge.
Are you concerned that's not going to happen?
I'm concerned that a lot of money has to be raised. I'm concerned that a location has to be found, and it has to be an acceptable location. Carlos Santiago has a big task in front of him. The governor authorized $240 million, but Carlos has to raise $60 million of that. And $60 million in this economy, in this community, that's a hard amount of money to raise. So, and Carlos Santiago is good. Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of confidence in him and all the people at UWM who are going to be able to do this. But that's a real challenge to raise $60 million. So we need to push that effort forward and get that school built so we have the first ever School of Freshwater Sciences in the United States right in this region. Meanwhile, I think the things that are going on in the other schools are very exciting. MATC is starting a program for 2-year certificates for water lab technicians, and we have a lot of water flow labs in the Milwaukee area. That's going to be a great program. Marquette has its water law program, and as more and more diversions are requested for Great Lakes water, those lawyers are going to be necessary. Yes, sometimes lawyers are necessary. They're going to be very much needed. UW-Whitewater has their science and business program. And personally, I'm sick and tired of having to do a national search when I want to find a marketing major who knows something about water. I can now get that out of the Whitewater program. That's very exciting. But those kids are not going to go into those programs unless they know that it's going to lead to jobs. And so a real key part of that over the next few years is internships. The water technology companies in this region have to step up and offer internships, and when the kids see that they're going to get internships, and internships can lead to jobs, they will enter the program and we'll have the talent pool we need.
Let me get a couple of comments from each of you.
One thing maybe to expand on what Rich has just talked about, the internships. One of the things the Water Council has done is this year we had 14 internships that we created of students from the local schools. That didn't exist a year ago, and it just existed because the Water Council, acting as a cheerleader, facilitator, marriage broker with some of the businesses and some of the universities, was able to create it. Out of those 14 internships, I think there were at least 3 or more got permanent positions with the companies with which they were interning. Our goal is to expand that internship program. Next year we want to have at least double, and the year after try and get to 50. But that's a critical part of workforce development, to have the schools step up and have the training programs, whether it's law or public policy or business, And then to have the opportunities for the people in those schools when they graduate to get jobs. But the key thing for us is those jobs are going to be in the Milwaukee region. That we are providing opportunities for young people coming out of these institutions to stay here in Milwaukee and work in the water industry.
Perhaps a comment or two from the two
I
of
might
you.
throw something out that we just haven't discussed. I think obviously taxes and tax incentives and legislation, we've certainly hammered that through. But wholeheartedly, it's more than just the taxes and legislation that bring businesses to this community. It's a quality of life, it's having some of the best road systems, and it's our education system. We have to fix MPS. And that might not be something that we typically think about from a water situation, but we have to fix MPS.
And I think that I cannot stress enough the opportunity we have and the right elements we have in our hands right now. Our company and other water-related companies, we have decisions to make this week, this year, next year, new products, who is going to design, who is going to engineer, who is going to fabricate, and where do I have the best condition, not only from the educational manpower standpoint, but from a financial standpoint too. So that's very important for us to really implement on a very efficient way what we have created so far.
Let's take some questions from the audience. As you see, there is a microphone right here. So if you have a question, you can come up to the microphone, identify yourself if you would, and keep your questions brief. This is very brief. I don't see anybody there, but feel free to ask away here. We've got these folks with us for another 15 minutes or so. If not, I can continue to do that.
While we're waiting,
Jeff Smoller has one.
Okay. I was going to say, while we're waiting, I was just going to make a quick comment about this talent issue. Badger Meter recently announced that we're going to bring about 25 jobs from our Tulsa facility to our Milwaukee facility, because I believe that the talent is going to be in this region going forward, that when those people retire, we're going to be able to find the right talent. Now, that's significant because, remember, Mercury Marine was talking about going from Wisconsin to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is one of the 10 best states for doing business. Wisconsin is one of the 10 worst states for doing business. But I'm bringing jobs to Milwaukee simply because of the talent question. That's how important it is.
Jeff Smoller.
My name is Jeff Smoller. I'm with the University of Wisconsin system, working on a Wisconsin idea assignment relating to water and how we can look at water like we looked at dairy at the turn of the last century. My question is this, and it touches, the answer will touch on recruiting, workforce, on political aspects, et cetera. How can the vision of Milwaukee be seen by not just the Milwaukee area citizens, and I think each one of you has done a wonderful job of expressing the potential, but 5.6 million citizens in the entire state of Wisconsin. And again, there are political implications for that, there are workforce implications, there are investment implications for that. The 5.6 million people in Wisconsin, how can they identify with your vision?
I would, again, I kind of talked about this before, but it's the same way that the people in Milwaukee identify with the biotech in Madison, or the people in Milwaukee identify with the printing industry, up north. I think when you have some good wins and some good successes, we all win and celebrate together, and we need to operate as one state and stop fighting against each other for resources, and we're only going to succeed if we all succeed together. I'm not running for political office, obviously, with that answer.
Well, Milwaukee is the largest city in Wisconsin, and we're the largest economic region in Wisconsin. And Milwaukee needs to be successful for Wisconsin to be successful. And I think one of the things that we've done in terms of the Water Council is we've been very good at promoting our water initiative. We've gotten lots of publicity, which is throughout the state. I think the people throughout the state, the 5.6 million, whether it's in Madison or Green Bay or elsewhere, understand that what we're doing in Milwaukee. I mean, they read about it in Midwest Magazine. There was a feature story, I guess the magazine that was in the airlines for the last 2 months had a picture of a boat on the cover. Significant lead story about Milwaukee and its water initiative. So there are articles in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel all the time about the water initiative. So I think the word gets out throughout the state, and I think that people will recognize the importance to the entire state of Wisconsin to the success of the Milwaukee region.
I think that we need to start on a place. So that's, we started in Milwaukee, but this is clearly a state initiative, like in Israel. It started, with a couple of centers, and now it's a program for 7 million inhabitants.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I agree. I mean, you know, Milwaukee can sit here and say we are envious of the northern cities where they have forests and lakes and wonderful tourist dollars flows into those cities. We can be envious of it, but we don't have those tourist dollars. We don't have the lakes and forests. The New North, the Valley region, has a great wind power program going on up there. I think it's fantastic that they're doing that. We don't have that in Milwaukee. Now, Janesville can say, why can't we offer water for jobs like Milwaukee? Well, Janesville has a water problem. Waukesha has a water problem. They can't do that. Let's all accept what we have and what we can do and capitalize on that, not fight about it, and recognize that the more business we attract into Wisconsin, the more people we attract into Wisconsin, the better the whole state is.
Go ahead.
Hi, Lynn Marotta, Director of the Environment Programs at the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread. And I wholeheartally agree with you with the opportunities that we have here relative to our water resources and our manufacturing base. MillerCoors has done a lot, as you kind of outlined there, Kim, on their internal practices to drive conservation, especially at, I think, some of the plants outside of Milwaukee, as well as what's going on here in Milwaukee. One of the things that is different, though, about Milwaukee versus Singapore and Israel and even some of the U.S. cities that you mentioned, like Philadelphia, is the incorporation of water conservation, water filtration, all kinds of things like that into our own internal practices. Philadelphia recently announced that they're planning to spend $1.6 billion on green infrastructure. It's really the primary thing that's driving their water management right now. What do you recommend? I mean, in thinking that necessity is the mother of invention, the more we use these things, the more we can attract others here, but also the more it will drive our own R&D as we're thinking about it and using things. What do you think the Milwaukee region can do to help drive and ensure that we are incorporating the best practices possible into our own efforts?
Well, I think that you touched base on necessity. It was one of the prime causes in Singapore and Israel. And I think that our necessity is to grow from what we have. We have a very solid industrial, engineering, and water-related bases. We have already critical mass in terms of industry. So our prime is to grow this industry in a concerted way. And in terms of standards and regulation, we as a nation and a state, we have what's considered world-class standards and regulations that would match with technologies and new that would be created to continue to be in the forefront and export this outside of Wisconsin and outside of the country.
Not to disagree totally, but we have a long ways to go on water quality standards here.
I think one thing, Lynn, that we're also doing, and we recognize that we can't be a global leader in water technology if we have beaches that have signs on it that say no swimming. You know, MillerCoors has been terrific in cleaning up Bradford Beach, and that has brought that whole back to life. And it's packed, and I commute past it twice a day on my way into work and my way home from work. And it's wonderful to see it packed with people, a diverse representation of the entire community. There are businesses there now. And we need to do the same thing throughout. And that's part of what we have in our Global Compact application. The Global Compact designation is not just an application where we say we'd like to do these things. We've committed to several projects in wastewater treatment and other areas that we're going to focus on to be a model city. And if we want to be a global hub of water technology and a global leader, we need to have a city that has clean water and clean beaches and good recycling programs and good water reuse programs and all of the rest of the stuff. So I think there's a recognition that that's part of this whole initiative.
There are two countries that are recognized as global leaders in terms of technology and enforcement of regulations. One is Germany, and the other one is the United States. And if you get to travel and you look in the comparative basis, if you go to Southeast Asia or Latin America or Eastern Europe, you will see the huge gap. And you really feel proud of being an American and being in the water business. Although we have ways to go, but I think that...
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Dave Kleiber. I'm the owner of SF Analytical Laboratories. And by the way, we were started in 1900 by Dr. Summer out of Marquette University. Our offices used to be at 15th of Wisconsin. And we're now in New Berlin, 109 years old. We do commercial testing of water and many other things. We have environmental testing as well as food testing, microbiology, food chemistry. I've determined, thanks to the leadership of Rich, that over half of my sales are water related in some way. And we are jumping on board, making sure things are happening. My question is regarding the concept of a public-private partnership. We have a tendency in our state to be very socialistic and anti-business, as you touched on, Rich. And I'm very concerned, and I want to see what you guys think about how we can make this happen through synergy, a public-private partnership, so that, I mean, we do 250,000 tests every year, and we're growing. How can we get the schools and the public labs and the private labs and other industries that are in the public-private sector to work together to really make this thing happen, so that we're not fighting each other for dollars and pulling at each other. We really have some practical experience in the front lines. The academics have their side of it, and of course the public labs have their piece of it as well. How can we work together?
I think that if you look into Singapore and Israel again, and going back to our more refined business plan, and defining the leadership, and defining the investments, defining the roles and the returns that we're going to have. And I see the government as the initial catalyst to this initiative for a number of years, and then it becomes self-sustaining. That's how I see it.
I also think there's a couple things that are going on. SF Analytics is a great member of the Water Council and has been working with us. One of the things we've done in the Water Council is we've formed an industry-university linkages committee, which is a fancy word I refer to as the technology committee. But basically what they're doing is having regular meetings where we are bringing in the key researchers in this region in water from the various universities, and the companies are sending in their chief technology officers. I send in my VP of engineering, and we have these meetings quarterly. And basically, the researchers talk about what they are researching, and the companies talk about what they need. And we're looking for matchups. And we've had some matchups. We've had some successes where they've been able to work together. The other thing is we have an application to the National Science Foundation to become the 41st IUCRC in the United States, and that's Industry University Cooperative Research Center, where the National Science Foundation will put $250,000 a year into this effort. If we have 2 universities and a minimum of 6 companies, each of the companies putting in matching funds, and they will do joint research around water. And this is the 41st in the United States, and the first one focused solely on water. We have the companies, we have the universities. Marquette and UWM have agreed to work together on this, and when we get approval from the NSF, we will be able to launch this effort. Those are the types of things I think we can do to get these private-public partnerships together, because there's a lot of cutting-edge research in water technology being done in our universities, and there's a lot of cutting-edge research being done in our companies, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be talking to each other and working together.
One thing also, Mike, to bring this back to the bigger topic of jobs, water jobs in the 2015, is when you get that public-private partnership working, when the federal government is giving out research money, when UWM and Marquette are doing research, and that then translates into innovation and patents and licensing and startup companies. The Association of University Technology Managers, which are all the universities in the country that are developing technology and licensing out, keeps terrific statistics. One of the most recent year that they're available for 2007 is that there were 555 startup companies coming out of university-based technology in 2007. The key thing is 555 is pretty good. One is we're not getting our share in southeastern Wisconsin. But the key thing out of the metric that caught my attention is 72% of those 555 stayed in their home state. Those startup companies stayed where the researchers were because they wanted to have access to the researchers and the scientists and the continuing technology development. So that public-private partnership can generate the technology, can generate the startup companies, and statistically, 72% are going to stay right here in southeastern Wisconsin.
I might add just one thing, and again, you guys might clobber me from both sides, but from the Milwaukee 7, the Water Council group, I think there also needs to be a gap analysis, because at least what I keep hearing is there's a little bit of a they and a us, or a we and a them, and so I think it's at least pretty clear that the government is not maybe actively is involved in this and is involved, and we're not going to be able to do it by 2015 if we don't have every key stakeholder there and really moving in the same direction. And so I think that would be really integral.
Let me take two more quick questions. Thank you for your question. We appreciate it. And if you can keep the questions brief, we'll try and get to both of them before we wrap up here.
My name is Eric Langell. Recently, the Milwaukee Common Council considered leasing Milwaukee Waterworks to a private company. What are your thoughts on whether Milwaukee should privatize its drinking water system?
Well, there have been successful privatizations, and there have been unsuccessful ones. United Water was thrown out of Atlanta. It was pretty much a failure down there. Meanwhile, Veolia has been extremely successful in Indianapolis. By all measures, that has been a wonderful operation down there. In Milwaukee, the problem that the city of Milwaukee has is that our water rates are very low. We have the fourth cheapest residential water of the 50 largest cities in America. But meanwhile, our property taxes are high, and we have other social needs crushing the city. And the city's saying, gee, if only we could maybe raise the water rates a little bit. First off, that would get people to conserve water. We just bring them up to maybe not even to the national average, still below the national average, but bring them up a little bit. We could use some of that money to abate our high property taxes and address some of our social issues. The problem is Milwaukee can't legally do that. They can't just do that because in Wisconsin, the Public Service Commission controls rates. So the theory that Wally Morix was exploring, and he didn't even have a proposal, he was just exploring it, was could we sell the waterworks, monetize those assets, put it in a trust fund, and use it to abate property taxes. I think it was worth looking at. Obviously, when you talk about water, it shows you what a hot topic this is. When you talk about water, people get very upset. Doesn't bother anybody that our electricity is provided by a private company. Doesn't bother anybody that our gas is provided by a private company. But when you talk about water, that's a pretty important issue, and people get very upset. So the whole thing was backed off. I think there are other ways to deal with this issue, and I think the city should still explore it. I'm not necessarily advocating higher water rates, but clearly we have a tax problem in Milwaukee, and if we can abate it somewhat with water, I think that's a laudable effort.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Well, it is an effective way. In certain countries, it has a lot of political connotations, but it's an effective way, and as I said, in citizen countries where they want to free up assets and to grow, to provide better services, or to invest in other sectors.
Let me take the final. Thank you for your question. Let me have this gentleman will get the final word.
Good morning, Danny Mushin. The comments that were made in regard to government funding for business, I found, excuse me, to be very interesting. It seems that Wisconsin, like any other state, if somebody new is coming into Wisconsin for whatever the purpose, we go after them in an attempt to get them here, i.e. General Motors to keep Janesville open, i.e. Chrysler to keep Kenosha open. In the avenue that the Water Council has succeeded in and will continue to succeed, is there any way that the Water Council can work with the government to get I guess, an amount of funds that would be targeted to bring business into Wisconsin that is not already here, that would see a future with the educational programs that are here, the environmental needs, the new technologies, and Wisconsin builds with employees, the company builds, and target an amount of money where the Water Council decides which companies should be approached that could be beneficial to Wisconsin, and see if you could create some proactive activity to bring these companies to Wisconsin.
You know, I'm not sure that, you know, the Water Council that may not be the right organization. We can be the cheerleader, we can be the marriage broker, but if the state's going to do that, I think the state's got to commit the money. As I said earlier, we've got, you know, no budget, no employees, and no authority. So all we can do is be a cheerleader and hope that we can encourage the state to do some whether it's set-asides, whether it's tax incentives, whether it's what Israel and Singapore did. They put together a large pot of money and went after them. Those are the kinds of things that I hope the state and the public side of the public-private partnership is going to consider. Those are the things we're talking about, and by raising them here this morning, I hope we're going to get some of the governor's attention. Maybe he'll start thinking about some of these things. And I think I'd encourage everybody to talk to their legislators and political leaders and encourage them to do the same thing. That's what we're going to be doing.
I think that, as Kim said, it's not us versus them. I think that we really need to join forces now with the government on a more effective way. And we could be the ones that will provide the list, target these sectors, these companies, not only on a nation basis, but on a global basis. But, behind this is, what programs are going to have behind the incubators, the early adoption in here, the lab, to attract those companies to come in here.
And Dan, you raised a good point. Our primary, like other states, Wisconsin's primary method of reaching out to other companies is through mass mailings and phone calls. And, we have this image that some CEO is going to open an envelope on his desk and see a picture of the Calatrava and say, that's it, we're moving to Milwaukee. I had one girl call me, and she was obviously a very young girl, who said, Mr. Meeusen, this is the Virginia Department of Commerce. Have you ever considered moving your company to Virginia? And this was about my 5th phone call that week, and I was feeling a little surly, and I said to her, oh, thank God you called. The trucks are all packed. We were just wondering where we were going to go. I said, hey, everybody, it's Virginia. We're going to Virginia. And then I said to her, and thank God, because they're about to indict me in this state, I got to get out. And there's this silence. There's this silence on the end of the phone, and I said, I'm kidding. But we're not going to do economic development through mass mailings or cold calls. Companies are usually enticed to come to relocate, to expand in another area because there's something that makes very strong economic sense. And that means you've got to have the kind of hub that we're building here. So when people think water, they think Milwaukee. Right now, when people think computers, they think Silicon Valley. My dream is that by 2015, when people think water, they think Milwaukee. That's what'll get the businesses here.
Thank you.
We'll wrap things up for this session. I thought that'd be a good point to end on. The comedic stylings of Rich Meeusen, I thought that'd be a nice ending point for us. Thanks for your attention.